I'm delighted today to be joined by Shivallah Dharma here in Talgum. Shivallah, thanks so much for coming and talk to us. It's been a long time coming, this interview. We've been hoping to do it for quite some time, really since the O Heart Festival, but finally we got around to it on a beautiful day as well. Your book is being released very soon, or you're heading out with it into the world very soon, I gather. Can you tell us a little bit about that first?
It's actually called Deep Peace Beyond Suffering, and it's been submitted just recently to Hay House Publishing Company, which is supposed to be one of the biggest publishing companies in the world. They will be reviewing that amongst others for the contest that is completed by March. We will receive notice by then, and then from that point onwards I'll know whether they're accepting me or not. But in the meantime, I actually have a writing coach who's helping me to release it as an ebook as well. So a short version of that book will be released very soon on the internet.
And how long have you been writing the book?
The book started probably in 1986 or something like that, 87. I was living on top of a Zen Buddhist center, meditation center, just renting the place, and I was woken up in the middle of the night and I just could hear all this wording coming, and I'm not a writer at that point of time, never expected it, and I just started writing spontaneously, just for quite some time, then tried to go back to sleep, got woken up again, started writing again, tried to go back to sleep, got woken up again, remained awake until the morning, and then I was just buzzing, and in a state of awe in a sense, because I realized that what had come through was quite significant. So that was actually the beginning of it.
Golly, so that's incredible. And do you feel that you were being contacted by some kind of spirit you had to get this onto paper?
I don't know if you would say contact by spirit is more. It's more of like being in a certain state already, and being influenced by the Buddhist center because they had very traditional strict meditations happening down below. So that was also contributing to it, the atmosphere. And it was a time of me even removing myself from a particular spiritual community and being more alone. And in that aloneness, I was just tuning in, listening. Well, what is my purpose now? What am I to bring into the world now? How do I bring that into the world? And that pretty much came through, and yet I knew at the time it wasn't time for it to be published as well. And it wasn't quite complete, but from that point onwards, it opened up a whole new pathway. And my teaching work began pretty much soon after that.
So it sounds like you had already been engaged in a life of meditation before that already for quite a while.
Very much, yeah. At the age of 19, I experienced a car accident where I actually died in that accident at the foothills of the Mount Dandenong Ranges in Melbourne, Australia. And from that point onwards, it was like I had become a three-year-old child again in a 19-year-old body, endeavoring to adjust to the dimensional reality of this world. And the only person that actually recognized that something had actually shifted in that respect was my mother at first. And so I stayed at home for the next 3 years, going through all sorts of mystical experiences, lots of ecstatic moments of bliss pouring through me, speaking in tongues, wild runs because too much energy was pouring through me. My mother would yell out saying, "Are you having one of your spiritual highs again?" And I'd say, "Yes, Mum, it's okay, it's okay." So things like that were occurring for the next 3 years, but also moments of, I'd say, almost bordering on depression at times, because we were going through quite a family traumas also. So there's a lot of extremity of experiencing happening. But then the real significant event that took place that literally marked or initiated, defined that moment of my spiritual path, was through meditation of gazing at a candle every night in my bedroom, that was next to my mum and dad's bedroom. And after about a few months of this meditation, I would always close my eyes. I would see the light inside the forehead, but on this particular night, the light kept on filling my head. It got more and more intense until finally it started to fill my whole body. And then at a certain point, my bodily form disappeared, it dissolved, and there was simply the awareness of me as consciousness in this formless light. And there was a tremendous bliss beyond even physical bliss that came with that. And a sense as if I was about to disappear forever. And a part of me wanted to, in that sense, you know, just to completely dissolve. But there was like some indication from an intelligence that indicated it's not time. So then I had to remember how to breathe again, because there was no breathing happening. There's no sense of heartbeat. So I had to, and no movement of my body. So I had to remember and get my hands moving again. Then I came back into wakefulness. Then I lie down and just said, "Good night, world," and went back to sleep. And so that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And the beginning of the beginning, so to speak.
Gosh. So you had a huge flooding of spiritual energy. And I mean, I know of some people who that actually is too much for them.
It is. Is an extraordinary flooding of the whole body. All the cells went through what you would call a translation. A translation that moment. Obviously, I must have been prepared to some degree for it. The car accident itself obviously was quite an initiation for that. And it was a time, I would say, that brought me to that space of stillness. And a sense of very, very deep peace in that moment. Because I recognized that very saying that I think might be in the Bible also, when thine two eyes become one, thy body will be filled with light. And that's exactly what happened. So in the recognition of that, there was simply an awareness that, the light that's within me, this is it. And it's not within me, I am this light also.
And do you remember anything of the car accident or the state of consciousness that you had immediately after that?
Well, there's still to this day, there is no memory of that car accident, of even hitting another car. It's completely blanked out. But what I remember was that as I was waking to, all of a sudden it was night time. And it wasn't night time before that accident. Apparently I was unconscious for approximately 2 hours. As I'm waking up, I'm then looking down towards my shirt, and there's blood all over me. Then I look up, and there are night lights beaming into the car, and then ambulance drivers and police officers are pulling me out of the car. And I was fluctuating in and out of consciousness, coming to every so often, and then as they were lying me on the stretcher, I remember looking up at them and voicing something to the effect that I love everybody. And I wanted to ask them, how's the driver, how are my friends? And then I started to say to them basically that this is what the world needs. The world needs to know peace. It needs to know love. And as I was talking about this, I remember them looking down at me, and they were chuckling a little bit and smiling and saying things to kind of console me. But in that moment, I didn't need any sort of consolation. And I do remember, as I was gazing around, there was like a soft, golden, hazy light everywhere. And that was very, very significant, because somehow there was some sort of what you'd call it, a spiritual or a cosmic intelligence within that soft golden hazy light. Or it was actually alerting me to the fact that there was an intelligence behind all of this, even the accident. There was no sense of pain I was aware of. There was no sense of worry about my own condition. But there was definitely a complete, like, inside-out shift of my nature had happened. So.
Before you were 19, before the car accident, did you have any spiritual inclinations in your life?
Our father, not who art in heaven, but our father, our dad, he was a police officer and a prosecutor in the courts, very high-level detective. But at the same time, he was very quietly taking us on a regular basis to the VSU, which is the Victorian Spiritual Union, where there's a lot of psychic development taking place, mediumship development, communication with what you call higher dimensional levels of intelligence, with masters from Venus, things like this, and psychic healing, magnetic healing taking place, and the whole family loved it. So we grew up amongst that. But I would say that it actually still goes back to the very beginning of me going to school, where I noticed the very first day that I was going into the classroom, I looked into the door, looked into all the other kids, and I felt like there's something not right here. I could feel, I could sense intuitively that the vibration about me going into that classroom just didn't feel right. Maybe it was because it was too early for me, or maybe it's because somehow it felt like I don't resonate with these kids. So the very first day that we came out for a break, where you're given a little bottle of milk to drink, everyone's got a little bottle of milk, and I'm listening to the other boys, and they're rough as guts, the way they're talking to one another, and the way they're teasing the girls. And I couldn't comprehend that. And I look at, this is the first time looking at all these little girls in this sense, and I'm seeing the beauty of them, the sensitivity of them, and these boys are just teasing them and making fun of them. So, and I recognized from that point onwards, I was very different. So all throughout primary school and high school, I never experienced a fight with any other boy. I had other boys trying to provoke me. They wanted to see if I could fight, if I would fight them, even friends for that matter. But all I would do was just look at them and just look into their eyes. And it's like my heart was showing them, hey, this is who I am. I'm your friend. I love you. And so I would say to them, I don't want to hurt you. And I don't want to be hurt by you. So they'd hit me across the head or punch me in the stomach, and I'd just keep on gazing into their eyes. I wouldn't feel any pain for some reason. I just keep looking. And then they look at me and they just walk off and go, you're crazy. But this is 10, 11 years of age. And then 13, then 16 in school. This sort of thing's happening. So I knew, it was like, no, I've got a different nature, a natural peacefulness. Even when playing football, and I was an athlete, I'd have the other team elbowing me, trying to punch me, to knock me over, and I'd just look at them and keep running for the ball. It didn't make sense. Compute, why are they doing that? It's not about hurting one another, it's about going for the ball and the competition of that, playing for that, the thrill of that. I would take the punches, but I wouldn't retaliate. It wasn't within my nature to do so. So I knew, as you can see, I had a different nature that was already there. And my mother did say, in actual fact, even from 2 years of age, I was the only child amongst 4 kids that she could leave in a corner alone, and I wouldn't be crying out for her. I'd be very peaceful, sitting there. I could play with things. She knew I was content. I was okay.
Shivallah, after your car accident and experiences of conducting so much energy. When did you begin to engage in a formal spiritual discipline?
21 years of age, I went back to the Victorian Spiritual Union and asked if I could participate in a mediumship psychic development course, which was one night a week for one whole year. We would sit in circle, approximately 12, 13, 14, 15 people, and we had a teacher guiding us, how to open up the third eye, how to become more sensitive to meditation, how to be listening to the heart, and if you had the capacity for mediumship, how to be open to that. And so that was a very strong discipline. So I would travel on the train, in those old red trains, for 45 minutes to an hour, all the way in, every night to go to the spiritual union for that. And I discovered that I had the capacity for mediumship, of course, because of the opening that happened through the car accident. So I became a natural medium to be able to allow what is referred to as a celestial intelligence to be able to speak through me. And even though in a sense it was a part of me, it was also defined to be quite and distinctly separate also. So it was a very unique experience to have this other intelligence, or seeming other intelligence, speak through and utilize the voice box, and to be inside watching all of this happen. So that was the first discipline. But then the next discipline that happened, which then took me on for years to come, was that through that time, through one of my, what I would call a prophecy dream or a vision dream, during that course, I had a spiritual teacher, a master, come to me in that vision dream. And I was already requesting this, asking, I want to be with the master. I want to know who is my master. I want to be with the master of masters. That's why I was putting out. Because I was already learning about masters and the master of masters through Alice Bailey and the teachings of those teachings back in the day. And then all of a sudden this teacher showed up. And in the vision dream, he was sitting on one of those unusual big high-backed chairs, and he had a disciple standing on one side, a disciple standing on another, and they were dressed in robes. He had a long beard, a moustache. He spoke with me during that vision dream, and then it was, I'd say, several months to 9 months later, I came across his book, and I saw his eyes, saw the beard, saw his name. That was the one. I knew that was him.
And then you discovered the actual written teachings.
It was the writing teachings. And I remember, I think it was in the second book that I had of his, he said, you don't need to come to India. He was in the physical embodiment. He said, you don't need to come to India to see my bag of bones. If you are connected to me through the heart, you can take initiation just where you are. And he said, all you need to do is just be loose and natural. And in that moment, I just knew, that's it. I don't need initiation, formal, any of that. I'm living it already, and I'm already connected to him through the heart. That's enough. And he's acting as a reflection, a mirror to my deeper essence. I already understood that as well. But then it was a matter of months later again, I saw some of his disciples who had come through into Melbourne, into the Paran area. I was already dressing in just all white calico clothing and only white all the time already. And I was endeavoring to live what's called the Essene way of life that was in alignment with Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua ben Joseph. But then these disciples came through all dressed in orange. And they had an aura about them, some energy as well. So of course I naturally approached them, asked them, and they said they're disciples to that particular master. And that was the teacher I've already been connected to through the books. And I could feel in their presence, wow, there's something they've got. something very wild and loose. So then through that, through my studies more and more, it came about that it was time for me to take initiation, for formal initiation. So I wrote away to that teacher. He wrote back and said, here's your new name, and this is what it means, and here's the message for your path, your life. And it just, everything rung through, and I was just jumping up and down with elation. It's like resonated completely. So that was in a sense, a true formal initiation through a living, physical, enlightened teacher. And yet that wasn't the only enlightened teacher that came into my life. There was another one that came in quite early, or two more actually that came in quite early. And yet that first one was the one that I was, in a sense, not following, but living according to his directive most of the time. And yet I was also reading the works from the other two, but also connecting on an inner level with the heart of one of those others as well.
What does it feel like, your heart connection with the Master, that you really feel aligned to?
It was a time when I was learning about what they call the Great White Brotherhood, the Himalayan teachers and masters, the masters and teachers, and the sanctuary, I guess you can call it, in the Andes Mountains of South America. And I wanted to go there too, also to connect with that, around Lake Titicaca, I think they called it. And on a heart level, I felt like, I know this, I've been there, I'm still connected to it, and now I'm coming back home to that deeper, high-dimensional community of spiritual practitioners, so to speak, or those who are actually not practitioners, those who are in service to humanity and in service to the truth, in service to divine love, those who are in service to the Great One, as they call it, you know. So, and yet it's not just earth-bound teachers. There are other dimensional levels and extraterrestrial levels of teachings coming through that as well. So I felt inside just tremendous elation, and like it was awakening memories, like almost like cellular memories, and giving me a sense of like, this is my greater purpose. I'm here to be, obviously the car accident opened up something in me, profoundly so. Then that meditation of light opened up an awareness to the capacity of light through this body. Now I have an obligation, and now this is giving me more direction, and I'm remembering the modeling of these masters and teachers, and what it's reflecting back to me in aspects of me. That it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle coming together and beginning to see a picture. This is who I am, this is what I am, this is my path. And it's more than what I realized. And so it was thrilling. Yeah. It was a wonderful time.
And what were your challenges? I mean, what were you struggling with? I mean, there's the light coming through, but inevitably that shows the dark more. What were the issues that you were really struggling with?
Have you got a week we can sit down?
Yeah, we'll just play it in fast forward mode.
Fast forward, okay. So I would say that in a sense, the diamond of the potential of being a leader, of being a catalyst, of being a visionary, a spokesperson for a new paradigm was being forged. And that was being forged through the mere fact of being in the family collective energy of my father, my mother, my brothers. During the late teens, especially after the car accident, and encountering my father, especially after the car accident, who was a leader of men on the streets, literally, who was able to wield tremendous force and authority in the world with tremendous confidence, both physically, he was a physically powerful man, as well as authoritatively, understanding law, intellectually as well. Then I'm coming up and headbutting it's like a young warrior headbutting the old warrior. So that was in a sense traumatic on one level, but challenging, but also the traumas and the pains and the heartaches of seeing our mother, the feminine principle in our mother withering away because of her early childhood traumas and the trauma of what she was going through and corroding her psyche, going into addiction, collapsing into self-contraction more and more, and then the son having all this awakened abilities and skills, intuitive ability to heal, to see, trying to call her back into consciousness, trying to help herself heal, and being thwarted many, many times because of the overall family trauma, and not having enough knowledge or insight yet to bring about an end to all of that and to be able to just evoke peace once and for all for the whole family. No, I didn't have that yet. So there was a sense of failure and heartache with that. And a failure was quite a big one coming up many times. But then also my ability to be able to speak truth like that in any given moment was being oppressed a lot of the time because of this, what do you call it, this bantering between my dad and myself, this conflict between him and I, of one authority of the world versus the authority of the new paradigm of a new world trying to come through. And yet my dad was also a rebel in his own right. However, this was what was happening. So to this very day, it's been guiding me. It's been challenging me to come into the fullness of being that diamond fully polished. So along the way, yes, okay, how do I polish all the different facets of the diamond so it can the light can shine through it clearly? Okay, let me do this group therapy. Let me go to this counselor. Let me do this meditation. Let me listen to this discourse from my teacher. Let me listen to this discourse from that teacher. Let me take that in, this in. Now let me heal me on this. Okay, this therapist, that healing modality. How do I get in touch with that? That complete confidence to speak the truth no matter what, and to stand in that with complete confidence that I am this, no matter what comes at me. Yes, I am to speak this now because this is what I am, this is who I am. But it's amazing, it also has served its purpose. All of that seemingly sense of difficulty and struggle with coming out of that, you say the caterpillars, what do you call it?
The chrysalis.
Yeah, coming out of that chrysalis, the struggle in that was necessary. If I had have been forced out of that too soon, I would not have had the strength for the wings of the butterfly then to open up and to be able to have the strength to take flight. It's been an extremely long journey, and yet in the last 25 to 30 years, since 1993, yes, I did start my group work of teaching to groups of people. And yet also the struggle every so often from 1993 to now, the difficulty to speak to the masses so to speak, to the collective more. Always coming up against a little bit more of that, what needs to be purified in the deep psyche around the whole wounding or self-doubt. Are there any remnants of self-doubt still there that need to be uprooted and cleared? And yes, here's another little strand of self-doubt. Okay, let's clear that now. All this, so this is what the journey's been. And then going into the wedding industry for 10, 11 years, public speaking, what a challenge, what a suffering, what a pain at times. tremendously traumatic at times, and yet there was the obligation to hold that space of equanimity, of peacefulness, no matter what. But inside, going through like hell on earth, it felt like, with all of a sudden all this sense of shame, the fear of failure in the middle of speaking publicly with the videographer and the photographer on me, because they're expecting perfection in the speech and the conducting of the wedding ceremony. And there, somewhere inside, subconsciously, my dad's voice, you're going to fail again.
Yeah. The friction is essential. You know, we think it's like, oh, why do we have to put up with these annoying circumstances? But actually, without them, we're not going to get there.
Everyone is given their unique recipe. And I wouldn't even say that we choose it, even though we think or may assume we choose that. But I would say, in a sense, it's delivered to us as part of our DNA package, you could say, in a sense, from the great intelligence that is way beyond what we can even comprehend. We are all given a unique recipe, an encodement of how that's going to play out, or how it may play out in a number of different ways. And then all of a sudden, as it starts to unfold, the challenges and the invitations are presented to us. And they strengthen us, or they may weaken us at times. And yet that weakening may look as if it's a failure or a weakness, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just not quite the right time yet to come out of that chrysalis. If we trust in that, if we truly learn what trust is really about, then we accept even our failures and our weaknesses and the sense of incompetence at times. Maybe I'm just a little bit of self-doubt there and I can't quite purify that yet. I can't see the root of that. Therefore, it's like it's going to play out and I can't stop it. And all of a sudden I've just failed again, and oh no, I've gone into this sense of like shame again. And now it's taking me down into that well of shame, and it's toxic shame. Maybe that's why it needed to happen. I needed to be taken down into that well of toxic shame to be able to see that I am strong enough to even be in the middle of that, because I am consciousness. I am the one that is untouched by even that, in the middle of that. Not necessarily having to purify and cleanse and clear. No, I just have to be immersed in it, and guess what? I am the one who is bearing witness to that. And now, just by being consciousness to that, I can see it dissolving, because the light of my consciousness, which is awareness, it just dissolves that which is not true. It's just dissolved. And then what's reawakening is, I am light. I am the light of awareness. So maybe these weaknesses, these sense of failures that happen, the challenges, the traumas we go through, and traumas on top of traumas, and the sufferings that I've gone through, all those sufferings that I thought I was suffering over, more and more I've come to accept that all those sufferings, and even suffering, the suffering of my mother, that what she was going through her alcoholism. She was a wounded child, went through hell as a child. My father was a wounded child who went through hell as a child. So, okay, now I've come in, I've got the strength to take all that in. Hey, I've got the strength to take that all on. I've taken on my father's DNA and my mother's psyche. Now let's see how strong I really am. I don't even need to challenge myself with that either, but hey, I am consciousness. And I know what peace is. I know what the goodness of spirit is. So let this be what I bring forth, what I bring to you could say, the table of humanity through this family configuration. This is what I'm bringing forth. And the whole family configuration is inviting that and directing that bit by bit, even through the windy, crazy, dark moments, it's drawing that out.
What it makes me think of is the idea of that everything that arises is for our own undoing, because these circumstances and the state that we get into in this life sometimes seems so intolerable. But when you start to see it as always being things that are arising in order to be purified, then you see things from a different perspective. I just wanted to get onto your book now. It seems like everything has been working towards what you've written. Is the book a method of some kind or a system? I know that's a very big question.
So the book starts off with the introduction of the car accident, speaking about the defining moment of deep peace beyond suffering, that it's 1974 at the foothills of Mount Dandenong Ranges, and I'm waking up in a car accident, gazing down at my shirt with blood all over. So it starts off like that. So it brings people right into that very unique defining moment of when it started for me. But then after the introduction in the book, it starts off like this. And this is the answer to your question. What you see now, next page. What you hear, next page. Now, turn over the page. What you feel, turn over the page. Now, next page. What you're aware of, look to the next page. Now, turn over the page. Is all you are aware of. Now. So it's a living experiential book. It's a guided meditation book that automatically, through the dialogue, brings somebody, anybody, into that space of now. Just as I spoke it to you now. That's why there are very few words in the first section of the book. So people turn over and they're taking it in, absorbing it. And subconsciously they're absorbing all the space on the page that's around even the word now, or what you are aware of. All that space, even though they may not recognize it, they're looking for the words, looking for the information, looking for the doing. They're receiving all this space. So then, soon after that initial invitation in the first section of the book.
Can I just stop you there? Because I've got to just say this. What you're talking about reminds me of when I first read Krishnamurti. And the way he writes, it just brings you more and more into the present moment, of being aware of everything, inwardly and outwardly, in the present moment. I just got to say that because it's an incredible feeling.
Krishnamurti is one of those influences, one of my influences. Da is one of my influences. Osho is one of my influences. Mayabhava is one of my influences, even though he was in silence, he had a profound effect. And the teacher, Australian teacher, Barry Long. So there is an aspect of Ramana Maharshi within all of that as well. So there's a combination of all that have all had an influence. And I love Krishnamurti, the way he would speak at times. Very straight. Let us consider this. The yoga of consideration, as Dao calls it. The yoga of consideration. This is what it is. So, after the very beginning of the introduction, as I just mentioned it to you, it then quickly goes into a dialogue between the voice of love and the voice of the world, or the voice of self. So you'll hear like an argumentation happening between love and self, love and the world. Lovers always extending an invitation to the self, always an invitation to the world, never arguing, always just extending an invitation. However, the self, the world, is always retorting with an argument, always in reaction. And so that's how the dialogue goes for some time. By the end of that, what is revealed towards the end of the book is that it's all about returning to the power of now. Not as in Eckhart Tolle's book, but the power of N dot O dot W dot, the nectar of wholeness, the nectar of wholeness now, embracing the nectar of wholeness by being the nectar of wholeness now. After that dialogue with, then it goes on, the book goes on to more of a deeper, you could say, into a deeper consideration of what is suffering. Really, let us look at what is suffering really. Traditionally we expect or we assume suffering is this, and we're used to identifying with suffering over our suffering, or even extending that to suffering over the fact that we're suffering over our suffering. But what is suffering? Primordial suffering in the very beginning. What if suffering is a journey? Simply a journey, to enter a journey of entering existence, entering the law of duality, entering the sense of separation. What if that is a conscious choice that we have entered, to the degree that it's like a magical mystery tour that we have welcomed from the very beginning? And so the next part of the book goes deep into that consideration, to look at suffering in a very different way, so that we can really come to that point of comprehending what is trust, and what does it really mean to accept the darkness, the so-called darkness in our life, as well as the light, and to see how the darkness is still serving the light.
I reckon I need to read that book. That sounds amazing. Wow. Well, I don't think we can top that really, Shivallah. I think we're going to finish the interview there because that was fascinating. And yeah, wow.
Thank you, John.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
I feel like we've entered there was a beautiful big butterfly just appeared behind you just a moment ago when you were speaking, and I really felt that was
transformation.
That was a little bit of the divine.
Yes.
Saying, yes, I am here. Thank you so much, Shivallah.
Thank you, John.